Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into some serious Windows security today. And our source material is this GitHub repository that's packed with hardening techniques.
Mm.
Hopefully we can pull out some of the most valuable pieces for our listeners.
This repo is amazing. It's so thorough. It only uses officially sanctioned Microsoft methods, too, which is a big
Oh,
deal.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you want to avoid those glitches you can get when you start messing with, like, unofficial tweaks, this is the way to go.
Right. We're going for that rock-solid security, not, a system that crashes every week because we mess with something we shouldn't have.
Exactly.
It looks like this repo covers everything from just basic settings all the way to really advanced stuff like device guard, which I gotta say, I'm kind of curious about.
Oh, device card is so cool.
Yeah.
It basically lets you make your computer more secure than even those secured core PCs that Microsoft sells.
Wait, really? More secure than secured core.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to know how that even works.
Yeah.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, this repo is from a user named HotCakeX, right?
That's right. And it's constantly being updated, which is always a good thing. It uses all the official tools like group policies, PowerShell commands, registry keys, all that stuff to really lock down your system.
So no shady downloads or weird hacks. Got it.
Exactly. And it focuses on both security and AD privacy, which is a nice bonus.
Oh, very nice.
Absolutely. And it's compatible with all the latest Windows versions and all the newest security features that Microsoft keeps adding.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like you've really gone through this repo.
Yeah.
How is it organized? Where should we even begin?
Well, it's organized by order of importance,
Oh, okay.
starting with the most important stuff. So right at the top, we have Microsoft Security Baselines,
Okay.
which are basically Microsoft's own recommendations for a secure system, kind of like a blueprint straight from the source.
Right. So it's like you're starting with a good foundation before you start adding all the crazy security bells and whistles on top.
Exactly. Then there's Microsoft 365 apps, security baselines. So if you use 365, these add another layer of protection.
Okay, so if you're working in Word and Excel and all that, you'll want to pay attention to this part.
Absolutely. It's all about locking those apps down to prevent macro attacks, data leaks, you name it.
Very smart.
Okay.
Okay, what comes after that?
Now we get into the really fun stuff. Microsoft Defender.
Ooh, okay.
This section is huge GE. It covers a ton of settings, everything from tweaking cloud scan times to enabling super strict blocking of unknown files.
Hold on. Tweaking cloud scan times. What does that even mean? And why would we want to do that?
So when Defender finds a file and it's not sure what it is, it can upload it to the cloud
Right.
to check it against Microsoft's massive database of threats. This repo lets you increase that scan time from the default 10 seconds to a whole minute.
A whole minute? That's a big jump. Why would we want to do that?
It gives Microsoft's cloud engines a lot more time to analyze the file.
Right.
And it's super important for catching that really, really sneaky, cleverly disguised malware.
So more time means they're more likely to catch it.
Exactly. And then they go all in on blocking those unknown files
Okay.
with settings like zero tolerance and block at first sight.
Those sound intense. Zero tolerance. Is my computer going to start giving me speeding tickets for downloading too fast?
Not quite. But it does mean Defender's going to be very cautious, even if that means maybe blocking a legitimate file once in a while.
So probably not for the super techie people who know what they're doing, but for your average user, it sounds like that could be a good safety net.
Definitely. And it goes hand in hand with the recommendation to participate in Spynet.
Oh yeah, Spynet. So that's where if my computer finds something weird, it tells Microsoft, and they use that information to protect everyone, right?
Exactly. It helps Microsoft keep their threat detection up to date, which makes everyone safer.
Okay, I like that proactive approach.
Yeah.
What other Defender settings stood out to you?
There's a lot in here, but controlled folder access caught my eye.
Okay.
It basically locks down your important folders
Okay.
so that only specific apps can change them.
That sounds perfect for ransomware protection, right? Because if you can't even access the folder.
You got it. And they emphasize protecting your OneDrive folder
Oh, that makes sense.
because that's where a lot of people store, their really important stuff these days.
Yeah, my OneDrive is basically my life at this point. And what I like is that it gives you PowerShell commands to really customize those folder permissions.
Right. So if there's an app that you trust and it needs access, you can just add it to the allowed list.
Okay, so you can make it work for you.
Exactly. It's a nice balance between security and still being able to use your computer.
Okay, so we've got super powered cloud scans, hardcore file blocking, folder lockdown, What else does this Defender section have?
There's Smart App Control, which uses AI to block threats in real time.
Ooh, so it's not just relying on a list of, like, known bad apps.
Right.
It's actually watching what they do.
Exactly. It's constantly learning and adapting.
That's pretty impressive. Is it always right, though?
It's getting better all the time, and the more people use it, the smarter it gets.
Okay, so that's good. It's like a security system that actually learns as it goes.
Exactly.
That's reassuring.
Hmm.
Okay, what else is in this Defender treasure trove?
Let's see. There's mandatory ASLR, which is a bit more of a technical thing, but it makes it a lot harder for hackers to exploit vulnerabilities in your software.
Okay.
And then there are even like specific exploit protections for programs like Microsoft Edge and Quick Assist.
Okay, I'm going to admit some of that went over my head.
Yeah.
But as long as it's making things more secure without breaking my computer, I'm all for it.
They walk you through everything step by step, and it even automatically excludes programs that are known to, have compatibility issues.
Okay, that's good. So it's not just blindly applying these settings, it's making sure that it works with your setup.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next category, attack surface reduction rules.
Nope.
These are all about, closing off the common pathways that attackers use to get into your system.
Attack surface reduction. That
Yeah.
sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It kind of is. Think of it like this. The less exposed your system is, the harder it is for those attackers to find a way in.
Okay.
These rules target very specific behaviors
Okay.
that are often abused by malware, like launching suspicious scripts or downloading files from, untrusted sources.
So, like, I'm locking all the doors and windows and making sure there are no weak points in my defenses.
Exactly.
This is starting to sound like a digital fortress over here. Okay, let's move on to the next category. This one really caught my eye. BitLocker settings. What's so special about how this repo handles BitLocker?
Well, BitLocker's all about encrypting your drives, right?
Right, yeah.
This repo takes it to a whole other level.
Okay.
It recommends military-grade encryption for all your drives, not just the system drive.
Military-grade encryption. Okay, now we're talking. Does that slow down my computer at all?
Not really. Modern computers have dedicated hardware to handle all that encryption stuff, so it all happens in the background. You don't even notice it.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And the repo helps you choose between different security levels too, right? I remember seeing something about enhanced security.
You have a good memory. So enhanced security, it's like a double lock for your system drive.
Oh.
It uses your TPM chip, a startup PIN, and a startup key, which is usually stored on a USB drive.
Okay.
So to unlock your computer, you need both the PI and that physical USB key.
Okay, that sounds pretty hardcore. I do like that they also stress the importance of saving your recovery information, especially to OneDrive's personal vault.
Right.
Because, let's be honest, I'm probably going to lose that USB key at some point.
It happens to the best of us, but OneDrive's personal vault adds that extra security because it requires additional authentication to get in there.
That's very smart. I'm sensing a theme here. Redundancy.
Yeah.
Backup plans for the backup plans.
Security is all about layers, right? And speaking of layers, they recommend enabling TPM anti-hammering.
Ah, yes, TPM anti-hammering. That's like the security system for your TPM chip, right?
Exactly. The TPM has a built-in cooldown period, so after a certain number of failed attempts,
Right.
it makes it almost impossible to just crack the encryption.
So it's like a security guard for your security guard.
That's a great analogy. And they even give you the exact numbers, 32 attempts before a 2-hour cooldown.
Wow, they don't mess around.
No, they don't.
Okay, so we've got military-grade encryption, double lock for the system drive, a bodyguard for the TPM, and probably a bunch of other stuff I don't even understand yet.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there in this BitLocker section?
Let's see. They recommend either hibernating or shutting down your computer when you're done working,
Really?
especially if you're dealing with sensitive information.
Oh, okay. I usually just leave mine on sleep all the time.
When your computer's in sleep mode, some data might still be present in the RAM.
Right.
Hibernating or shutting down completely wipes the RAM, so there's no chance of, recovering that data.
So it's like digitally shredding my short-term memory.
Exactly. It's just a good habit to get into, especially if you're in a, high-risk environment.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else about BitLocker before we move on?
One last thing, they strongly advise against using third-party encryption tools with BitLocker.
Oh, really? I thought more encryption was always better.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
BitLocker is designed to be a comprehensive solution.
Gotcha.
And throwing other tools in there can sometimes create conflicts or even weaken the overall security.
Okay, so it's like trying to improve a recipe. and you just start adding random ingredients.
Yeah.
You might mess up the whole thing.
Exactly. BitLocker is great on its own.
Okay, I'm convinced. This BitLocker stuff's been fascinating. Now, you mentioned earlier something that really blew my mind. Device Guard. You said it could make my computer more secure than those secured core PCs.
That's right.
Okay, I'm ready. Tell me everything.
It's a set of features that uses hardware-level security to
Okay.
protect your system, like building a virtual fortress around your computer's core component.
Okay, I'm listening.
One of the key features is virtualization-based security,
Yeah.
which uses hardware virtualization to isolate those critical system processes from the rest of the operating system.
Hold on. Hardware virtualization, that's like running a whole other operating system inside my current one, right?
It's similar, but in this case, it's used to create a really secure environment where sensitive processes can run without being messed with, even if malware gets onto your system.
So it's like putting them in a secure bunker.
Yeah, like a safe room.
Completely separate from everything else.
Exactly. And to make it even more secure, the repo recommends enabling UEFI lock for virtualization-based security.
UEFI lock. Is that like that lock we were talking about for the TPM?
It's a similar concept, but it's at the firmware level,
Okay.
which basically means you can't just disable these features with software. You'd need to physically open your computer and tamper with the hardware to bypass it.
Wow. So even if someone steals my computer, they can't just disable this without some serious effort.
Exactly. It's a great deterrent.
Okay, this is getting really good. What else can Device Guard do?
There's Secure Boot, which makes sure that only trusted software can run during the boot process.
Okay.
Kind of like a security check at the very beginning of your computer starting up.
Secure Boot. I think I've seen that in my BIOS settings.
Yes.
But this repo says we need to enable it in 2 places. Why is that?
It needs to be enabled in both your system settings and your UEFI firmware.
Oh.
Think of it like this. Your system settings are like the security guards at the front gate, right?
Yeah.
The UEFI firmware is the security system for the entire building.
Oh.
You need both.
Gotcha. So you need both layers of protection to make sure nothing gets in during that startup.
Exactly. Then there's Windows Defender Credential Guard, which keeps your login credentials safe by isolating them in a special protected container.
Okay, so even if some malware gets on my system, it can't steal my passwords because they're locked away.
Exactly. Big step up in protecting against credential theft.
Wow, this Device Guard really is shaping up to be the ultimate shield. What else are we looking at?
There's some pretty technical stuff like System Guard Secure Launch,
Okay.
which protects your system from firmware attacks. And then there's SMM Protection, which safeguards that system management mode.
Okay, that went a little over my head again, but I'm getting that it's basically hardware-based security. That's really tough to break, right?
That's the gist of it, yeah. And it's worth noting that a lot of Device Guard features are already on by default on newer computers.
Oh, okay.
This repo just makes sure you're taking advantage of everything.
So by following this, I'm not just turning on random settings. I am optimizing what my computer can already do.
Exactly. And you're bringing your system closer to that secured core level of protection.
This Device Guard stuff is really cool. Anything else I should know before we move on?
There's a couple more technical bits. Kernel mode hardware enforced stack protection helps stop those attacks that exploit, vulnerabilities in code. And then there's LSA process protection, which protects the local security authority.
Okay, definitely need to look into those more. But as long as they're making my computer more secure, I'm happy.
Oh, they definitely are. And the repo explains each feature clearly so you can really understand what they do. It even covers something called machine identity isolation configuration, which stops attackers from pretending to be your computer on the network.
Whoa, this is like some next level stuff.
It is.
It's like I've got a whole team of digital bodyguards watching my back.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot. Maybe it's time for a breather.
Yeah, let's take a break.
When we come back, we'll tackle TLS security, the lock screen, and all that other fun stuff you've been teasing.
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready for round 2.
Okay, we're back, and I'm ready for more security goodness. What's next on the list?
Well, after that Device Guard deep dive, the repo takes us through TLS security.
Okay, TLS security. I think I've heard of that. It has to do with like encryption on the internet, right?
Exactly. TLS is what secures most of our communication online these days.
Right.
It's what puts that S in HTTPS. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this repo, it really takes a hard line on TLS, especially when it comes to getting rid of those outdated versions.
It's like TLS 1.0 and 1.1.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember hearing those were bad.
Exactly. Sticking with TLS 1.2 and the newer 1.3 is a lot safer. And they don't stop there. The repo also recommends specific cipher suites.
Cipher suites. Okay, I'm going to need a little help here. What are those, and why should I care?
Think of cipher suites like different types of locks you can use on a door.
Oh,
Some are like simple and easy to pick, while others are much stronger and harder to break.
right.
Cipher suites are basically the algorithms that handle the encryption process in TLS.
Ah, okay, so the repo is recommending the strongest locks for my online communication. But why does the order of these cipher suites even matter?
It's all about prioritization.
Okay.
You want to make sure your system tries to use the strongest cipher suite first and then, only fall back to the less secure options if it absolutely has to.
Okay, so it's like ranking the locks from strongest to weakest, so my system always tries the toughest ones first.
Exactly.
Right.
And they go into detail on the logic behind their recommended order. It's all about maximizing that security.
Okay, I like that. So what else does this TLS section cover?
They also dive into ECC curve order, which gets a bit technical, but it basically affects the strength of those encryption keys.
ECC curve order.
Yay.
I'm going to trust you on that one. Sounds complex, but if it makes my connection safer, I'm all for it.
It definitely does. So by implementing these recommendations, you're essentially making sure your computer is using the most up-to-date encryption online.
Okay, good to know. What's next?
Next up is the lock screen.
Okay.
This section is all about keeping your computer secure, even when you're not using it.
Okay, yeah, sometimes I'm guilty of leaving my computer unlocked, especially if I'm just at home.
Right,
But I guess it's those little moments that can add up to bigger risks.
definitely. This repo suggests a bunch of measures to secure your lock screen, starting with automatic locking after a period of inactivity.
Right, like your phone does.
Exactly.
Yeah, I should probably turn that on, just in case I forget.
It's definitely a good idea. They also recommend requiring Rigor plus Alt plus Delete to get to the login screen.
Wait, that old key combo, I thought that was just like a weird Windows thing. It actually has a purpose.
It does. Requiring that key sequence makes it much harder for malware to fake the login screen and steal your credentials.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a secret handshake that only the real login screen knows.
Exactly. And then they recommend this really cool anti-hammering feature that uses BitLocker.
BitLocker.
Yeah. If someone tries to guess your password too many times, BitLocker basically locks down your entire computer.
Wait, seriously? It can do that?
Yeah. The only way to unlock it at that point is with your 48-digit BitLocker recovery key.
Wow, so it's like a self-destruct button for my data?
Not quite self-destruct, but definitely a good deterrent. And remember how we talked about saving that recovery key to OneDrive's personal vault? This is where that comes in handy.
Yeah, so even if someone triggers this lockout, I can still get my data back.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They also configure that account lockout policy, so limiting those failed login attempts and setting how long the lockout lasts.
Okay, so someone can't just keep trying over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another layer of protection.
Wow, this lock screen section has a lot of good stuff. Anything else?
They recommend hiding stuff like your email address and last login time, if you're using your computer out in public.
Oh yeah, that's smart. Wouldn't want someone peeking over my shoulder at the coffee shop.
And they even suggest blocking network interaction from the lock screen.
Wait, really? Why would you want to do that? Wouldn't that make it harder to connect to Wi-Fi or something?
It might be a little less convenient,
Okay.
but it prevents malware or anyone unauthorized from accessing your network or your data before you even log in.
Okay, so it's minimizing those entry points.
Exactly. And the last thing they recommend for the lock screen is enforcing some PIN complexity rules for Windows Hello.
Well, Windows, hello. That's the facial recognition stuff, right?
Yeah.
What kind of PIN rules are we talking about?
They suggest requiring a mix of digits and lowercase letters and setting an expiration for the PIN.
An explanation for a PN. That's new. Does that mean I have to make a new PN every few months?
It does, but it helps keep your PN secure, just in case someone sees you type it in or your device is compromised.
Okay, I'm definitely turning that on. This lock screen section is like a gold mine of security tips.
It is.
So what's up next?
Next up is User Account Control, or UAC.
Ah, UAC. Those annoying pop-ups, you mean?
Those are the ones. Remember those?
Yeah, sometimes I just click yes without even reading them.
We've all been there. But those prompts, they're actually really important for security.
Okay.
They stop programs from making unauthorized changes to your system.
Okay, so the pop-ups are my friends, not my enemies.
Exactly. So for UAC, they recommend using something called the Secure Desktop for those prompts.
Secure desktop. What is that?
Basically, it's a separate, isolated environment that's, protected from the rest of your system. So when that UAC prompt pops up, it shows up on this secure desktop,
Right.
which makes it a lot harder for malware to mess with it.
So it's like putting those prompts in quarantine,
That's a great way to put it.
away from anything dangerous.
Exactly.
Okay, so lots of layers, again.
Always layers. And that brings us to another area where layers are super important, the Windows firewall.
Yes, the firewall. It's like the barrier between my computer and the craziness of the internet, right?
Exactly. So they recommend setting all network locations to public,
Okay.
which means the system's going to treat every new device, every new network with suspicion.
Okay, so it's like telling my computer to assume everyone's a threat until proven otherwise?
That's a good way to think about it. And they go into a lot of detail about configuring those firewall rules,
Okay.
especially about blocking connections for the domain profile.
Domain profile, isn't that for computers that are part of a company network?
Yeah.
I thought this was for standalone PCs.
You're right, it is for standalone. Domain-joined computers have their own separate firewall stuff.
Oh, right.
So this repo focuses on making sure those standalone PCs are locked down tight.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're making MY Computer as secure as possible, even if it means, being a little less trusting of everything else.
Exactly. They also recommend enabling detailed logging for the firewall.
Detailed logging. What's the benefit of that?
Think of it like having a security camera recording all the traffic going in and out of your system.
Okay.
It helps you spot anything suspicious.
Right, so it's not just about blocking the bad stuff, it's about knowing what's happening.
Exactly. They even suggest disabling a network protocol called multicast DNS,
Multicast DNS.
which can sometimes be abused by attackers.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. It sounds like these firewall settings are very thorough.
They are. And that brings us to the next category, optional Windows features.
Optional Windows features, you mean like all that stuff that I never use?
Exactly. This section is about disabling things you don't need that could pose a security risk.
Okay.
It's like cleaning up your digital house. Okay, what are some examples of things they recommend disabling?
They suggest turning off things like PowerShell v2, which is an old version that doesn't have the best security features. They also say to turn off Work Folders Client,
Okay.
which is something that's mostly used in corporate environments.
So getting rid of all those legacy features.
Exactly. And then for things to enable, they highlight Windows Sandbox and Hyper-V.
Oh, Windows Sandbox. I've heard of that. It's like a mini virtual computer where you can test out programs safely, right?
Exactly. If you download something and you're not sure if it's safe, run it in Sandbox.
Okay, that's a good idea. What about Hyper-V? What's that one?
Hyper-V is Microsoft's virtualization platform. It lets you run entire virtual machines on your computer.
So I could like run another copy of Windows inside my Windows.
Yeah, it's like having multiple computers.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So with these features, I'm adding tools to my security belt.
Exactly. More control and flexibility.
Okay, this is really great stuff. What's next?
The next section is Windows networking, all about securing your computer's communication.
So we've locked down the computer. Now we're making sure it talks to the outside world safely.
Exactly. They say to disable a lot of those old protocols that have vulnerabilities, like NetBIOS, LLMNR, LMHOSITs.
Okay, so we're cutting off those communication channels.
Yeah, sticking with modern, secure protocols is key.
It's like switching from a rotary phone to an encrypted video call.
I like it. They also get into configuring SMB.
SMB, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's used a lot for file sharing.
Right.
So they want to make sure you're using the latest, most secure version, which is 3.1.1, and they block the use of NTLM, which is an old authentication protocol that's not so great.
Yeah.
And they enforce encryption for both the client and the server.
Okay, so just like TLS, we're making sure it's all up to date and as secure as possible.
Right. And they go even further by enabling QUIC for SMB.
QUIC, what's that?
It's a newer protocol. It's faster and more secure.
Okay, speed ND security.
Exactly. And they recommend, you guessed it, tweaking the cipher suites for SMB, same as we did with TLS.
Okay, so it's a full SMB makeover. This networking section is pretty detailed. I'm glad we have this repo to guide us.
It's a great resource. And that brings us to miscellaneous configurations,
Okay.
which is a mix of smaller settings and tweaks that don't really fit anywhere else.
Right, so it's like the odds and ends drawer of security.
Exactly. And even those little things can make a big difference.
I'm sure they do. What kind of things are in this section?
One of the interesting things is configuring early launch anti-malware
Early launch anti-malware.
to its strictest setting.
That sounds serious. What does that even do?
It's all about controlling which drivers are allowed to load during boot.
Oh, okay.
Drivers
Okay.
are those little pieces of software that let your hardware talk to the operating system, you know?
Right.
So the strictest setting makes sure only known good drivers are allowed to run during boot.
So it's like a really strict bouncer at the door of my operating system.
Exactly. It keeps bad stuff from getting in at that critical time.
Makes sense. What else?
They recommend disabling location services.
Really? What about maps and stuff?
You can still use those, it just disables the precise location tracking.
Oh, okay.
Websites and apps can still get a general idea of your location based on your IP address, but you get more privacy.
Okay, that's a good compromise.
And they cover a bunch of other things like hardening svcoast.exe, tweaking Windows indexing, setting up those custom event viewer views, enabling some specific audit policies.
All right, some of that went over my head, but as long as it makes things safer, I'm happy to let the repo handle it.
That's the great thing about this repo. It does all the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, what's next?
After all those little tweaks, the repo dives into Windows Update configurations.
Ugh, Windows updates. I know I should keep things updated, but they're such a pain.
I hear you. But this repo makes it super easy. It basically puts your computer on autopilot for updates.
Autopilot. Tell me more.
So it sets your system to check for updates daily.
Okay.
It downloads and installs them automatically.
Right.
And it notifies you when you need to restart.
That's amazing. I'm always forgetting to check, and then I end up with a ton of updates all at once.
Yeah,
And it takes forever.
definitely. And remember, those updates aren't just about new features. They often have crucial security fixes.
Okay, you've convinced me. Automatic updates it is.
Okay.
What else is in this repo?
Next, we've got Microsoft Edge browser configurations.
It's a browser. Okay. I spend most of my time online in the browser, so security there is really important.
Absolutely. They have a lot of privacy and security enhancements for Edge.
Like what?
Blocking third-party cookies,
Okay.
enabling those automatic HTTPS upgrades, turning on encrypted client hello for more secure TLS connections.
Sort of like giving my browser a privacy shield.
Exactly. They also disable those weak cipher suites in Edge, making sure it's using the best encryption. And they even provide links to websites where you can test your browser security to double-check everything.
Okay, that's handy. I like that. Anything else for Edge?
They also explain why they don't use Microsoft's pre-configured security baselines for Edge.
Oh, why not? I thought those were supposed to be good.
They are, but they can cause problems if you're signed into Edge with your personal Microsoft account.
Right.
It's all about avoiding conflicts.
So it's finding that balance between max security and actually being able to use the browser.
Exactly. This repo is all about real-world usability.
Makes sense. Okay, what's next?
Okay, next up is certificate checking commands.
Certificate checking command. Okay, I'm going to need some help with this one. What are those?
So certificates, they're a big part of online security.
Okay.
They verify that websites are authentic and help establish those secure connections we talked about.
Okay, so they're like digital ID cards for websites.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But sometimes those certificates can be fraudulent or compromised.
Oh, okay.
So this section of the repo gives you commands to find and remove any dangerous certificates.
So it's like a security audit for my certificates.
Exactly. They give you commands that scan your certificate stores, and they flag anything that's not rooted to the Microsoft Certificate Trust List.
Okay, I'm assuming that's a good thing.
It is. It's the official list of trusted authorities.
Gotcha.
And they also say to be careful about any certificates that aren't from Microsoft or related to official Windows builds.
Okay, so if you see something weird, just get rid of it.
Better safe than sorry.
Okay, good advice. What's next?
The next category is country IP blocking.
Country IP blocking. That sounds intense. What's that?
It lets you block all network traffic to and from certain countries.
Block entire countries. Why would someone want to do that?
It can be useful in some situations. So the repo uses a list of IP ranges for countries that are known for, like cyber attacks, or countries that are sanctioned by organizations like OFAC.
Okay, so if I was really worried about threats from those areas, I could essentially block them entirely.
Exactly. It's just another layer of protection.
Right, but someone could always use a VPN to get around that, right?
That's true. It's not foolproof.
Okay, so a helpful tool, but not a magic solution.
Right. Speaking of extra layers, the next category is downloads defense measures.
Okay, downloads defense. Tell me more.
This section is about stopping malware from running automatically after you download it.
Okay.
They use WDAC, which is Windows Defender Application Control, to block any executable files from running in your Downloads folder.
Wait, it blocks all executables? What if I download a program I actually want to use?
It doesn't delete the file, it just stops it from running on its own. You'd have to move it to another folder first.
So it's like a safety measure to make me think twice before running something.
Exactly. It helps prevent those accidental clicks.
Right, when you click on something and it starts installing malware.
Exactly.
I like that. That little extra moment of, are you sure you want to do this?
It can prevent a lot of trouble. They also block a few insecure script hosts, like wscript.exe, msha.exe, and cscript.exe.
I have no idea what those are, but I'll trust you on that.
They're commonly used by malware. So, better to be safe. This downloads defense section is a great example of how being proactive can really stop attacks before they even start.
I like that. Okay, what's the last category?
Last but not least, we have non-admin commands.
Non-admin commands. So these are things I can do even if I don't have, like, admin rights on my computer.
Exactly. It's focused on making individual user accounts more private and secure.
Okay, cool. What are some of those commands?
They recommend showing known file extensions in File Explorer,
Okay.
which can help you spot those tricky files that are disguised with, like, weird extensions.
Oh, yeah, when a file looks like a text file, but it's really an executable.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
They also suggest showing hidden files in folders.
Oh, okay. Why is that important?
Sometimes malware likes to hide,
Right.
so by showing those files, you might spot something suspicious.
It's like shining a light on those dark corners of my system.
Exactly. And they have a bunch of other suggestions, like disabling website access to your language list, using safe search, turning on clipboard history.
Wow, this repo really covers everything. This feels like the final touches on my security makeover.
It does.
So, have we reached the end? Is that everything in the repo?
We've gone through all the main categories, yes, but there's one more important thing. Trust and verification.
Trust and verification. You mean, how do I know this GitHub repo is legit?
That's a great point. And the repo actually addresses this head on.
Oh, good.
It gives you several ways to be confident that, you're not just following random instructions.
Okay, I definitely want to hear about this.
Yeah.
How can I be sure this repo is trustworthy?
So first of all, the repo has a public change log on GitHub.
Okay.
So you can see the entire history of changes, all the updates.
So I can see how it's evolved.
Exactly. It's totally transparent.
I like that.
They also use something called artifact attestations.
Artifact attestations.
It's basically a digital signature that guarantees the files you download are the same as the code on GitHub.
So it's like a seal of authenticity.
Exactly. It means what you're getting is the real deal.
Okay, that's reassuring.
What else?
They also generate SBOMs.
SBOMs.
Yeah. It stands for Software Bill of Materials.
Okay.
It's a detailed list of every component and dependency in the software.
This is like an ingredient list.
Exactly. You can see exactly what's inside.
That's good. I like transparency. What else can I do to verify things on my own?
The repo also uses verified commits.
Okay.
So the author's identity has been confirmed with GPG or SSH keys.
So it's like a digital signature, but from the author.
Exactly. And if you're really serious about it, they encourage you to fork the code and verify the changes yourself.
Fork the code. What does that mean?
Forking means making your own copy of the code on GitHub.
Oh.
And then you can, look at the code, test things out without affecting the original.
So I have my own little sandbox to play in.
Exactly. And they have clear explanations of all those key files, too.
Okay, so they're not just giving commands to run. They're actually helping me understand what's happening.
Exactly. It's about giving you the knowledge to take control of your security.
I'm really impressed by this. It's not just security. It's about trust, too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a ton. But even with all these configurations, I'm guessing there's more, right? Like, security is more than just settings, isn't it?
You're right. This repo goes even further and offers a bunch of general security recommendations.
Okay, so this is like the pro-level advice.
You could say that. Things like best practices, tips, general advice to help you stay safe.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those pro tips. Oh, okay, we're back. Ready for the last part of this security marathon. We've covered so much already, from device guard and BitLocker to firewalls and, all those little Windows features. But you were saying there's even more, right? Like those extra security tips, the ones the pros use.
You got it. This repo, it goes beyond just specific settings. It's like they give you a whole security philosophy, too.
Okay, I like that, a security philosophy. Like a code of conduct for being responsible online What kind of advice did they give?
Well, first off, they really stressed downloading your operating system only from those official Microsoft sources.
Right, that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't buy a car from some random guy in an alley, so why would I do that with my OS? Yeah.
Exactly. You got to make sure you're getting a clean copy of Windows. No hidden surprises.
Right, no shady downloads.
hmm
Okay, what else is in this wisdom guide?
They say to stick with the Microsoft Store and wing it for installing software whenever you can.
Oh yeah, Wing It. I've heard of that. Is that command line tool, right? But why is that safer than just downloading stuff from the internet?
Well, for a few reasons. First, the apps in the Microsoft Store and those Wing It packages, they're all checked by Microsoft, so less likely to have malware. And second, they both do this thing called hash checking,
Okay.
which basically verifies that the files haven't been messed with, like built-in security.
So it's safer than just clicking random download links.
Way safer. They also recommend using secure DNS.
Secure DNS. Okay, remind me what that is again.
So DNS stands for Domain Name System. It's basically the phone book of the internet. Like, it translates those website addresses into the actual IP addresses.
Right.
Secure DNS adds encryption to that whole process.
So it's like making a private phone call instead of shouting your request across a room.
Exactly.
Love the analogies. What else is there?
They're big fans of Microsoft Edge.
Edge, really? I thought that was just the browser that, comes with Windows.
It's come a long way. The repo actually says it's the most secure browser out there. They point to stuff like Microsoft Defender Smart Screen, which blocks bad websites, and all these hardware-level protections that make it really hard for attackers to, exploit stuff.
Okay, so Edge is like the secret weapon of browsers.
It's definitely worth trying if you care about security. And speaking of which, they also stress two-factor authentication, especially using the Microsoft Authenticator app.
Yeah, two-factor. That's where you need a code from your phone, right? As
Right.
well as your password.
Exactly. Makes it much harder for someone to get into your account, even if they have your password.
Good point. Okay, two-factor check. What else?
Backing up your important stuff to OneDrive.
Oh yeah, OneDrive. I've been meaning to set that up. But how is that a security thing? I thought it was just like storage and file sharing.
It's both. So backing up to OneDrive protects your data from things like if your computer breaks or gets stolen. And OneDrive uses encryption too, both when you're uploading and while it's stored.
Okay, so it's like an off-site vault for my data.
Exactly. They also give some advice on VPNs.
VPNs, yeah. Those are like essential for privacy, right? Do they say to use one all the time?
They're a bit more cautious about it. They recommend VPNs only when you really need them, like on public Wi-Fi, at a coffee shop, or the airport.
Oh, so VPNs aren't always the answer.
Not always. Sometimes a VPN can actually make things less secure, especially if you're using a shady provider. They even suggest checking out alternatives like Cloudflare Warp or Edge's built-in secure network, which can give you some similar privacy benefits.
Okay, so the right tool for the job. I like that.
And sticking with that theme, they also suggest going passwordless with your Microsoft account and using Windows. Hello.
Passwordless? How does that even work? No more passwords.
Basically, with Windows Hello, you can use things like facial recognition or fingerprint scanning to log in, so you don't need a password at all.
That's pretty cool. So my face is my password. I'm guessing that only works with newer computers though, right?
That's right. And to really boost your privacy, they recommend using email aliases for your Microsoft account.
Email aliases. What are those?
It's like having extra email addresses that are linked to your main account. So you can use different ones for like shopping online, social media, all that. That way, if one gets compromised, it doesn't affect the others.
Oh, I like that idea. Keep everything separate.
Exactly. They also really emphasize setting a UEFI firmware password.
UEFI firmware password. That one sounds a little scary. What is that?
So UEFI, that's the low-level software that controls your computer when it starts up. Setting a password there, it basically stops anyone from messing with those settings, even if they have your computer.
So it's like a lock on the control panel of my computer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Super important for protecting against tampering. They also recommend using NTFS or ReFS file systems and enabling this thing called Mark of the Web.
Okay, NTFS is normal for Windows, right? What's ReFS? And what's this mark of the web?
ReFS is a newer file system from Microsoft. It's designed to be like super reliable. And Mark of the Web, that basically tags files that you've downloaded from the internet, so your system knows to be extra careful with them.
So it's like a warning label for internet files.
Exactly. Helps stop those drive-by downloads.
Wow, this is really detailed. They even have some suggestions for Xbox security, like setting up a ping eye or using that lockdown feature.
Right. Extending those security habits to all your devices.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so what else?
Last thing, they have some words of caution about open source software.
Open source, I thought that was usually considered safer because the code is, like, public for anyone to look at.
That's a common myth, yeah. Open source can be great, but it's not automatically secure just because you can see the code. They really stress code signing for open source stuff.
Code signing, what is that?
It's basically like digitally signing the software. To prove it's authentic and that it hasn't been messed with, it's a way of knowing that the software really is from who it claims to be from.
Oh, okay, so it's like a guarantee that it hasn't been hacked.
Exactly. And they recommend this service from Microsoft called Azure Trusted Signing. Makes it easier for open source developers to do that.
So code signing adds a layer of trust. Okay, what else should I know about open source?
They actually give a real-world example, the XE utility backdoor. It shows why open source isn't always perfect. Basically, a backdoor was put into this popular utility, and it went unnoticed for years.
Wow, that's kind of scary. Shows you can't just blindly trust anything.
Exactly. Open source or not, you got to do your research.
Okay, so research, be careful, and always verify.
Exactly. Security is an ongoing thing. It's not set it and forget it.
You got to stay up to date.
Right. Adapt to new threats.
Always be learning.
Exactly. This repo, it's a great start, but it's just a start.
Yeah, it's given us a ton of information to work with.
Now it's up to all of us to take this and, apply it.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more confident about my Windows security. This has been such a great deep dive. I can't believe how much we covered.
It's been a pleasure exploring all this with you. And hey, the repo is always being updated, so check back every now and then.
I will. And hey, if I find any interesting stuff while I'm doing all this, maybe we do another episode about it.
Definitely. Security is a journey, and we're all in this together.
Well said. And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into Windows security. We hope you've learned some good stuff to keep your digital lives safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those computers locked down.